Ladies and gentlemen, and my dear young friends, the tree that grows strong and lives long has deep roots. India, to me, is like an ancient, large banyan tree with its roots burrowing through thousands of years of history. This great tree has seen rise and fall of mighty empires, wars and famines that have wiped out millions of its people. It has also seen centuries of great prosperity. India's GDP was 25% to 30% of the world's GDP before the British started their loot in the 17th century. And it was reduced to only 2% of the world's GDP by the time the British left. Having lived in this country for over 6 decades, I have had the privilege to witness the change in the psyche of the country and how the world views this nation. When I was a young girl, India was freshly out of the colonial rule, but the Indian elite, the educated class, continued to seek validation from the same people who had exploited them for 200 years. They found cultural affinity with them. The men started dressing like the British, although the climate of this country was very contrary to that, and they spoke in English, and they aspired to be members of the elite clubs that the British had left behind. As a result of this attitude, the indigenous culture and the regional languages, which were mother tongue of all Indians, suffered. In the 50s and 60s, the world had two very distinct images of India. One was of abject poverty, with snake charmers being the principal source of entertainment. They imagined India to be a land where tigers and elephants roamed on the roads. The other picture was very different. It was of extravagance royalty. They imagined the fabulous palaces, the exquisite jewels, and the opulent lifestyle of the Maharajas. The great Indian middle class did not exist in the imagination of the West, but then they were not very wrong, because the great aspirational middle class has not made its presence felt till then. I remember in late 70s, 1970s, when I was in Germany, a German acquaintance, having learnt that I had done my post-graduation from an Indian university, and having noticed the gold bangle on my wrist, had asked me in all earnestness if I was a princess. When I laughed and told him I am a commoner from a very middle-class family, he was genuinely baffled. And cut to 2010, a young German volunteer entering the office of my NGO and seeing me working on my laptop while scrolling on my iPad for some pictures, had exclaimed, "Oh, this is how I imagined India to be. Everyone very tech-savvy and working on gadgets." Of course, she was very wrong. That was hardly the picture of India. But by then, the perception of India had changed in the Western mind. This German volunteer was in awe of the megacity of Delhi, its teeming population, the vibrant colors, and snaking cars on the road. This tree of a civilization has been brutally hacked many times by the numerous invasions and occupations that the country witnessed. It tore apart the social and cultural fabric of the country. And left behind death, destruction, and festering communal disharmony. In the 60s and 70s, imported idealism of Marxism and Maoism came into India and spread like parasites on part of the tree, withering it. The proponents of these ideologies convinced a section of the poor and oppressed that they had to rise in armed revolution against the state to get social and financial parity. And so they did. But what the poor got in return was decades of unrelenting violence in which thousands of them lost their lives fighting against the state machinery. And the progress that India had made in the meantime stalled in those violence-affected areas. So the people living there, who are mostly tribals, continued to grapple with poverty and marginalization. But despite these upheavals, the subterranean roots of the Indian civilization remained strong, and its sap continued to nourish the average Indian, empowering them to continue with their traditions, religious practices, and their way of life. As India progressed, the educated professional class emerged. With them came the IT companies, the BPOs, the MNCs, high-rises, glitzy malls, all adding sheen to the urban landscape. But life in the rural hinterlands of India remained almost unchanged, forcing millions of people to leave their homes and sever their roots with the land and converge to the city in search of livelihood and for better opportunities for their children. As decades rolled and times changed, the Indians became more and more confident of themselves. They stopped looking at the West for validation. They became more secure of their identity and started taking pride in their culture and heritage. Keeping with these times, a new breed of historians emerged who brought to notice the grand maritime history of ancient India. For 4,000 years, Indian seagoing vessels had dominated the trade routes of Indian Ocean. India's soft power has also spread to distant lands in the ancient times. After all, Hinduism and Buddhism are two of the ancient religions of India. And both these religions have their roots in India. From India, Hinduism spread to Sri Lanka, parts of Southeast Asia, and Nepal. Buddhism spread even further. It spread to Southeast Asia, parts of Central Asia, to China, Japan, and Korea. And in the changing times, the westernized Hindus who were with secular credentials and who thought it was politically incorrect to visit temples, whereas they were comfortable visiting mosques and churches, became somewhat irrelevant. The new Indian could be a devout temple-going Hindu, at the same time be a very secular space scientist, a doctor, or an engineer. They were comfortable with their roots and identity and their color. They took pride that people of Indian origin had become CEOs of mega corporations of the world. And also they took secret pride when the British PM or a candidate, Republican candidate to the White House proclaimed that they were practicing Hindus. It is perhaps simplistic to wish that the communal divide that is there in India would fade away with education and opportunity being given to all. But it could be possible with public will and political will. Because for centuries, India has been a very tolerant, embracing culture. But I fear the divide that will continue to be in India is the divide between the affluent English-speaking elite and those that do not speak the language. The latter are the people who toil ceaselessly to serve the privileged, and they work with the dream that someday their children will speak the language that the British brought to India and left behind as their lasting legacy. In order to become a modern, thriving nation, and should India should make its place in the global world, India must invest in science and technology. Technology in recent years has taken tremendous leap. But at the same time, Indians should celebrate their cultural heritage and take pride in the ancient wisdom that are enshrined in the Sanskrit texts and in the literature of the many regional languages, from Kama Sutra to Yoga Sutra. It's all there. We have inherited a treasure house of stories that has been handed down to us by generations. These are the stories that nurture us, that inspires us, that gives us values, that those fire our imagination, and they also connect us to our roots. Thank you.